Good morning and welcome to ListenIn, Community, Conversations, Connection. I'm your host, Pam Holland, and you're listening to Takoma Radio, WOWD 94.3 FM. For many of us, the ability to slow down and truly listen to our own inner guidance is an untapped resource. On this show, our guests will be sharing many powerful ways that they listen in to their own inner wisdom, and as a result, are more able to be in the present moment. Our guest today is Eva Jannotta. Eva lives in Rockville, Maryland, and she is a social media expert. And in fact, Eva will be helping you to connect with each other and with us here on the show through our website, ListenInShow.org. We'll be sharing more about the different ways that you can connect with us online, but for now, let's hear what Eva has to say about ways that she listens in to her own inner voice. So, Eva, you and I have known each other for quite some time, but it's only in the last couple of years that we've begun to work together, and I think that we have learned a lot from each other, not just about our areas of expertise, but also about communication, and we've shared many resources for mindfulness and ways that folks can listen in. We'll be sharing more about the different ways that you can connect with us online, but for now, let's hear what Eva has to say about ways that she listens in to her own inner voice. So, Eva, I'm so happy to have you here. What does listening in mean to you? What does that even mean?
Yeah, that's a very good starting question. And actually, one thing that it brings up for me this morning is a podcast I was listening to recently. The interviewee was talking about making decisions, and she said, I think we all know what the right decision for us is inside, but we're not always used to listening into that. And that really struck me because it appeals to me, the idea that I know what the right answer for me is in an inward level always, or at least maybe I know that I need to get more information before I make a decision, but I have that knowledge inside of me. But I don't always have a connection to it, or I'm not listening to it. And so listening in means to me, well, just that, to listen in, to be in tune with my gut and what my inner self is directing me to do.
Well, when you are able to listen in, how do you get that information? Do you understand what the question I'm asking is? Do you get information verbally, visually, in your body? When you do listen in, how does the information come to you? Or maybe it comes to you in different ways at different times.
Yes, I would say it's often sort of a body knowledge. Like sometimes logically my mind will tell me that something is a good thing to do. Let's say I have plans in an evening, and it's my mind is like, these plans are good plans. You're going to see these people, and it's a good thing to do. You're a person, be social. I have these set of logic reasons why something's a good idea. But often, or sometimes, not necessarily often, but sometimes the logic reasons are in conflict with the more emotional, mental reasons. And those I can feel in my body if I just feel a sense of heaviness or a sense of dread, and just I'm not looking forward to the social gathering. I don't feel energetic with the idea. I try to notice when there's like dissonance between what my mind thinks is a good idea and what my body and my emotional state is actually up for. Does that answer the question?
Yes, and I think that noticing your emotional state is a very good way to listen in.
Yes.
And your body can help you to get in touch with what your emotional state is, or your body can just straight out give you the answer.
Yeah, and what's tricky, though, is I think that we're not always encouraged to listen to our bodies. I think the intellectual mind, being cerebral in our decision-making process, is much more supported in the culture that we live in. And so I don't always, it's taken some intention to tune into my body and to give that as much meaning when I make decisions as my headspace.
Something that came up for me when you were talking about your process of having rational reasons for wanting to do something, but knowing internally that really it's not the right choice for you in that moment.
Yes.
Was that I believe that when that happens to me, even though I have acknowledged the body sensation or the emotion or whatever it is, I still feel the need to then justify it verbally or in my brain. I'm just now realizing that as we speak.
That's interesting.
That after I figure out what I truly want, then I rationalize it.
Then you put the logic on top of it.
Then I explain to whoever's not there that why I'm doing that, and I am so good at that. I can come up with a good reason to not do or to do absolutely anything, no matter how absurd it is. And what the conversation has brought up for me was just a recognition of that. I wasn't really aware that I sort of feel like I have to do that. I have to justify it.
We've been well trained, no, to think that you have to have rational reasons for your decisions. And I know kind of putting a stake in the ground to say, no, I don't feel like doing it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only reason. That's not uncomfortable. I'm not really comfortable putting that stake in the ground, at least with most people.
Right.
Usually I agree with you. I think, well, I didn't sleep that well last night, or, oh, I haven't eaten very well, or I didn't get enough exercise. I need to prioritize that over this. Yeah, I too do the rational explanation game. So
that's just an insight that I've come to today that I'm going to reflect more on because I don't know that piece is necessary.
Yeah, we could both question that, whether it's necessary to
justify.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
So another question that's related is, what gets in the way of you listening in?
My brain. Yeah, the thing that we just talked about, just this sort of prioritization of rational reasons to do things. And also another thing I try to pay attention to is the word should. Like when I notice myself thinking, oh, Eva, you should really do X, Y, and Z. I think it was my aunt who told me ages ago. She's like, when you hear the word should, you know that it's not your voice speaking. Should is the voice of someone else. It's something you read, or it's something you were taught in school or in business. When you're learning how to be an entrepreneur, as you and I are, we were taught that for example, you should network every week, or you should go to networking events every month. And so the shoulds get in my way sometimes. And it's not that shoulds are wrong per se, or that rational reasons are bad, but they're one level of knowledge and one way of making decisions. So I try, when I notice a should, I try to, notice it. That's a big step, right. First of all.
Yes.
And then just to become aware of where that voice might be coming from, since it's usually not mine. And then I guess I can make a more informed decision. Okay, do I want to listen to the should, or do I want to do a different thing?
Right. Do I want to listen to that friend who never approved of anything that I did's voice?
For example, yes.
Or my mother's voice, or my grandmother's voice?
Yes.
Do I want to hear their voice or my inner voice?
Exactly.
Right. That's great. So, as a child, were you encouraged to listen in to your inner wisdom?
I would say yes. I have to give great props to my parents on this front. My dad is a big mindfulness fan and was really open and verbal about that for our upbringing, which, sometimes induced a lot of eye rolling. But now that I'm older, I really realize the value of that. And I do remember one instance in particular when I was a teenager where I was encouraged to listen in by both my parents, but especially my mom. I was going through my first breakup, which, as you can imagine, or as you know, is incredibly dramatic and all-consuming, and I was weeping, and I'm pretty sure I was lying down on the kitchen floor at the time, just agonizing over whether or not to leave this boyfriend, and our relationship clearly was not bringing me a lot of joy. I was weeping on a floor. But I was really torn about this decision. And my mom said, seeing my indecision, my agony, she said, "You need to listen to your heart." And that was quite eye-roll inducing. I thought, what does that even mean, Mom? Like, thanks for nothing. I felt like it was such cheesy advice and it didn't feel concrete. And my initial reaction was very, defensive or just uncomfortable. But upon reflecting there on the floor, I realized that I knew what the right thing to do was. That didn't mean that it was a comfortable thing to do or like a fun thing, but I knew when I listened in to my heart, you could call it, I knew what the right step for me was. Mm-hmm. It turned out to be breaking up with this boy. Mm-hmm. And it was really gut-wrenching, but once I listened in and I realized that I knew what the right decision was, I still felt sad, but I no longer had the same level of doubt or just agony over this decision fatigue. Mm-hmm. And since then, I've returned to that advice, especially in relationships when something needs to change or when I'm starting to realize that I'm unhappy. I return to that, what my mom said, listen to your heart. And I find that the more I do it, the louder my heart is, you could say. It's easier to get to that place of, again, listening in and hearing what my inner voice is telling me to do.
So if you actively invite your heart to speak, then you can hear it more clearly.
Yes. Yeah, and in fact, I want to also give kudos to my coach, Leslie Zucker, who, when we're doing one of our coaching calls and I'm having a hard time making a decision, she has several times now prompted me to stop. We have walking meetings, so I'll stop walking, like out in my neighborhood, kind of awkwardly in front of someone's house, and she'll have me close my eyes and sometimes put a hand over my heart or over my midsection to listen, to really make a decision to listen into my heart. And yes, the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
It's interesting that Leslie's first instruction to you is to stop.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. That's what it takes.
So listeners out there, if you're trying to figure out how to listen in, why don't you try that suggestion from our friend Leslie Zucker? Mm-hmm. First, stop.
You have to. Stillness, I think, is perhaps critical to listening in.
Yes. I do think there are many, many, many ways that people can listen in, and some people do listen in while in motion. For example, I listen in while I'm swimming. Mm-hmm. I get my greatest insights, really. Almost all of my ahas come when I'm swimming. But if you're at a decision point or a difficult point, stopping is something to try. And so you can try it out,
Yes, and I would add to that when I say stillness, I don't mean necessarily physical stillness, but almost like mental stillness. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can absolutely get that when your body's moving. Right. And in fact, I think there's an interesting connection between, we're used to exercising our minds all the time, working, thinking about things, being stimulated with the internet or a screen or a book. And many of us, certainly myself, I don't exercise my mind quite in proportion, or my body, I should say, quite in proportion to my mind. And so sometimes when I'm moving is when my mind can really get still. because I'm kind of using my energy elsewhere. I'm working out my energy through my body, and that can be really powerful.
Right. That's great. So what are some other times in your life? Are there other times in your life where listening in has led to a big change for you?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I'm thinking of one time in particular. I used to work full time before I started my business. I worked full time at a job I really loved. And I thought I would be with that company for years. I was very happy there, but for a variety of reasons, it became obvious to me that it wasn't nearly as good of a fit as I thought. And that threw me into a bit of an identity crisis. I thought I'd be at this company for a long time. I really identified with my role there, but it wasn't working out the way I anticipated. So I did a lot of crying, and I had to listen in, and I came to the realization over a matter of several weepy weeks that it was time to move on to the next thing. And I'm very grateful. It was uncomfortable, incredibly uncomfortable at the time, but I'm grateful because I started my business and I don't have any complaints about that. But this sort of anecdote really reminds me how uncomfortable listening in can be. Not always, but it does, you do have a level of, if there's a big change on your horizon, that can be disorienting. And that time it wasn't a decision I felt quite ready to make, but the circumstances prompted me to make it, and I had to listen in and do a hard thing. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned earlier that one of your triggers is the word should.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, are there other words or other self-talk that you find yourself getting into that gets in the way of listening in?
Yes, I sometimes find that I'll get into a place where I feel like my mind is hyperventilating. My breathing, my lungs are okay, but my thoughts are going so fast, and it's quite overwhelming. And I recently read one of Brene Brown's books called The Gifts of Imperfection, which was really fantastic, and I recommend it to everyone. It resonated with me in many, many levels, particularly when it comes to what gets in the way of listening in. A lot of our sort of training or our habits to gain approval from people, to get appreciation from other people, to kind of people please. And also just are sort of in this area, there's certainly a work ethic of, productivity as a measure of self-worth and exhaustion as a status symbol. And just we work very, very hard here, and we don't always temper that with rest or play or other endeavors. And so I can definitely get into a mind spin, just racing thoughts and just really negative self-talk. I think perhaps many of us suffer from this, which is that we're much, much crueler to ourselves mentally than we would ever be to a person we know and love, which is bizarre if you think about that. We are our caretakers, custodians of ourselves, so to speak, and yet I know I am just mean to myself sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so that gets in the way of listening in. You better believe it. And I suppose it'll be a lifelong process of interrupting those mean thoughts and just learning different ways of relating to myself. Mm-hmm. And that's helps me listen in. I can't listen in if my thoughts are racing and I'm feeling hard on myself for not getting as much done as I thought I would in a day, or working fewer than 8 hours and feeling like that's somehow a big problem. I notice my own assumptions and expectations that, again, I think they're shoulds. They come from outside of me, but I feel like I need to measure up to them. And even when it's not the right thing for me to do, maybe I need a nap, maybe I need to just be silent for a while and meditate, or maybe I need to read a book, or sometimes my inner self is telling me that and I'm not listening in. And that's no fun for anyone.
So my next question was going to be, what are some of the tools that you use? And you just now mentioned a couple of them.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned meditating. What was the other thing you said?
I sometimes just sit silently with like a pillow on my eyes and just do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I read.
Yeah. Well, we need to be wrapping up, but if you have any other tools that you'd like to share,
yes,
that come to mind now, you can. And if anything comes to mind later, we can certainly put it on the website.
Great.
I know something that I'll just share for our listeners is that I often use Yoga Nidra CDs. Or
yes.
They call it iRest now, but they're just meditation CDs, and those can definitely help to center me and help me get to a place where I can hear my inner voice much more clearly. Do you have any last thoughts for our listeners?
I do have one quick last thought, which is I just want to share that for many years, meditation really annoyed me. Something about the way I was practicing it just wasn't jiving with me, and I felt resentful towards it. And I knew it was a good thing because that's what everyone says, but I was not accessible to me yet. And that actually changed about a week ago when I finally downloaded the app Insight Timer onto my phone, which you've recommended me and several others have as well. And I listened to a guided meditation. It was mindfulness for releasing anxious thoughts, which is perfect for me. And it really worked. And I had low expectations, but it really worked. I had some handfuls of seconds where I wasn't having any thoughts. And it was a very strange sensation because I could feel my mind sort of scrambling to come up with things to think because my mind is not accustomed to not having frequent active thoughts. And boy, did I sleep well after I did that.
Great.
So I do, for folks who might have some resistance around meditation, I recommend an app, and I recommend the app Insight Timer and guided meditation in general.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you so much, Eva. And for our listeners, remember that you can go to ListenInShow.com, and I'll have a lot of the resources that Eva's mentioned and a few others. I know that I have a guest blog post on my site about timers, about Insight Timer and other mindfulness applications. And so we can share that. We can also share Brene Brown's work.
Yes.
And now we'll hear from another community voice. I'm here with Leslie Zucker, and she's going to tell us what listening in means to her.
Thanks for having me. For me, listening in is about getting out of our heads and into our bodies. I think our heads and our minds and our egos and all of our attachments keep us in a certain way of thinking. And if we really, really want to listen into what's going on for us, I think we have to shut those voices down and give some time to our body to really tell us what's going on. And my personal way of doing that is through dance. And I notice it every time I dance that I'm able to actually hear what my body is telling me and what it wants to express. And of course my mind kicks in, but I feel like it's a thought that's generated from deeper within when it comes from my body than and through movement especially. For me, dance really does allow me to listen into my body and get out of my mind. So I'm grateful for my dance practice for that reason.
And do you find that when you've been moving, dancing, or moving in any way, that sometimes you get more mental clarity afterwards?
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, I truly believe that some of my best ideas and most of my best decisions come to me while I'm dancing. And there was a time in my life when I stopped dancing and I was actually quite down and out. And it wasn't until I started dancing again, thanks to the help of my life coach at the time who got me dancing again. And that practice has shown me that it's my way of getting clear about what's going on for me and what I really want, and it's for me just far more powerful than sitting and stewing in my mind about something.
Great. And, I think what's really important is that we each find our own way of listening in. And now for your gentle challenge. Find a time, sometime between now and our next show on Wednesday, October 5th at 8 a.m., to be guided by sensations in your body. As both Eva and Leslie mentioned, this doesn't come naturally to many of us, but once you practice a bit, you may well find that it saves you a great deal of time and reduces stress. The body knows. If you find this idea just downright silly, find another way to listen in and share it with us on Twitter at The ListenIn Show. You can listen to this podcast at listeninshow.org. You can follow us on Twitter or on Facebook, and we'd love to hear your ideas about how you have been practicing doing less, being more, and listening in.